I can still hear the sound of glass breaking. It wasn't from someone dropping a plate or a careless hand brushing a cup. It was from the silence cracking open in the middle of a celebration. 1 second, everyone at the baby shower was laughing, their voices rising like balloons toward the ceiling. And the next, her voice cut through it, sharp enough to wound. My husband isn't the father. The words seemed too heavy for the air, and yet she let them fall like stones into a pond. I froze, clutching my glass of water, suddenly tasting bitterness where there should have been nothing. Eyes turned in slow motion, every smile collapsing, every hand tightening around gifts wrapped in pastel paper. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could think was, why did she look directly at me when she said it? The baby shower had been staged like a photograph. Every surface of my sister's living room softened with ribbons, pale balloons bobbing lazily against the ceiling, and tables lined with pastel-colored snacks that seemed better suited for children than grown adults. The room smelled of roses and sugar frosting. Even the air seemed artificially sweet, as if it were trying too hard to keep us all smiling. I had arrived early at her request. She said she wanted me there before anyone else. I told myself it was a gesture of closeness, but the moment I stepped through the door, I saw the strain at the edges of her smile. My sister Amelia always carried herself like a performer waiting for applause. The way she tugged at the dress over her belly, the way her hands fluttered too much around the napkins, betrayed a nervousness I couldn't name. "Does it look right?" She asked me softly while smoothing the tablecloth, though she didn't wait for my answer. That had always been Amelia's way. She choreographed her own reassurance, feeding herself lines as if waiting for someone to admire the delivery. To everyone else, Amelia was magnetic, her beauty, her wit, her effortless charm. I was the quiet one, the one who filled spaces with silence instead of laughter. Growing up, I lived in the shadow she cast, though I told myself I didn't mind. Shadows could be safer, cooler places to rest. But at that shower, as guests filed in and her laughter lit the room, I couldn't shake the unease pressing against me, gnawing at the edges of that carefully staged celebration. Her husband, Eric, stood near the window, his hand tucked into his pocket, his smile the kind people practice in mirrors. I watched him glance at Amelia, then away again, repeating it like a nervous tick. Their connection had always looked fragile to me, as though it were held together by invisible threads that might snap if tugged too hard. And yet, no one else seemed to see it. I moved between the groups of women cooing over stroller designs and men patting Eric's back with jokes he didn't laugh at, offering polite nods without ever stepping into the light of their conversations. Every time Amelia's voice lifted across the room, everyone tilted toward her like plants chasing sunlight. I found myself staring at her, studying the flickers behind her eyes, the moments she let herself drift before snapping back into her bright persona. I tried to remind myself this was supposed to be a happy day. Every detail, from the gold-edged pastries to the pastel bows on gift bags, whispered celebration. But beneath it lay something raw, humming like a secret just out of reach. Every smile seemed one note too sharp. Every laugh felt rehearsed. Even the decorations themselves felt fragile, like thin paper that could tear at a breath. It was still a party, technically. But sitting there, watching my sister's hands tremble on the rim of her glass, I already knew something was waiting, crouched in the corners of that room. Something only she and I recognized. The trigger arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper, quiet enough that most people in the room didn't even notice. But for me, it was the sound of the first thread unraveling. I was stacking gift bags by the sofa when Amelia leaned down beside me, her perfume washing over like something sweet gone sour. She pressed a small, unmarked envelope into my hands. "Keep this with you," she said under her breath, her smile never faltering as she glanced over at Eric, who was standing by the punch bowl speaking with his coworkers. Her eyes lingered too long on him, her jaw tightening before she forced herself back into her mask of lightness. I stared down at the envelope. It wasn't decorated like the others, not covered in pastel stickers or cursive congratulations. It was blank, heavy somehow. The kind of heaviness you don't measure in weight but in meaning. "Don't open it here," she added, even softer before she straightened and floated back to the crowd as though nothing had happened. For the next hour, I couldn't focus on anything else. The envelope seemed to pulse like a heartbeat inside my bag. My sister joked with her friends, posed for photos, placed her hands on her belly in gestures so perfectly rehearsed they belonged in a catalog. But every so often, her eyes flicked to me, and I understood it was a waiting game. She was daring me to read it, or maybe begging me not to. The laughter around me began to blur, the sound rising and falling like waves I couldn't steady myself against. I found excuses to step away, refilling glasses, checking the kitchen, adjusting balloons that needed no adjusting, just so I could feel the envelope pressing against me, a reminder of something unspeakable soaking into the seams of this perfect day. Finally, I slipped into the hallway, my heart drumming tight against my ribs. For a moment, the sounds of the party muffled behind the closed door. I let myself breathe. The envelope trembled in my fingers. As I slid my finger beneath the flap, I hesitated, not from fear of what was inside, but from the way Amelia had looked at me when she gave it. Eyes full of something wordless, a plea or a curse. Inside was a photograph. At first it seemed ordinary, Eric laughing in what looked like a dimly lit bar. But standing beside him, her arms wrapped around him in a pose made intimate by casualness, was a woman I didn't recognize. No ethereal smile. No glow of a family man. Just a candid closeness that felt private. That wasn't my sister. Scrawled across the back of the photo in Amelia's curling handwriting, "Don't let them tell you I didn't know." The room seemed to tilt when I read it. A shadow crawled over the celebration. My stomach turned cold. The photograph was not a gift. It was a warning. I grew up in the quiet echo of comparison. That's the first truth I need to put on the table. My entire childhood existed in reference to someone else, the someone being Amelia. She was the golden child, and I was the shadow she cast. My earliest memory of the split between us is a birthday party. I must have been 6. Amelia, 4 years older, was blowing out candles on a cake taller than anything I'd ever had. She gleamed in a dress that looked store-bought, perfect, while mine was hand-stitched, uneven along the hem because my mother had done it last minute. I remember holding a balloon string tightly, feeling its pull upward, thinking about how balloons always left behind a stinging ache in the fingers that clung to them. Amelia released hers after making a wish, the family clapping. Mine popped in my hand, a sharp crack that silenced me in embarrassment. No one turned to ask if I was hurt. All eyes were fixed on her. That was how most days felt, like Amelia's wish was the only one that mattered. And I stayed behind grappling with broken rubber in my hand. My mother used to call Amelia her miracle because she'd been born after a miscarriage. I was a surprise that showed up when no one expected it. Amelia got piano lessons, ballet, orthodontics. I got hand-me-downs and polite mentions. It wasn't bruises or shouts, it was subtler, more corrosive. It was silence at my achievements, dismissal disguised as forgetfulness, attention rationed like something I hadn't earned. School didn't make it easier. Teachers adored Amelia. She was radiant, the girl who answered questions perfectly, the one who was asked to represent us at assemblies. I was increasingly invisible. When I did well, the comments were laced with comparison. Almost as good as your sister. You're lucky you have her to look up to. My worth existed only in relation to her excellence. And yet, in those fractured moments, I loved her. I think part of what hurt most was that Amelia loved me back. She'd braid my hair, whisper secrets at night when we lay in our shared room, press her nose to mine, and giggle. She wasn't cruel the way children sometimes are. She wasn't mocking me. She simply shone, and her light blinded everyone else. But as we grew older, her affection turned selective. It became entangled with performance. She hugged me when people were watching, called me my little baby sister in front of relatives. But in private, her looks carried something harder, more demanding. "Don't ruin this," her eyes sometimes told me when she was being admired. "Stay quiet." Our mother carried that tension into every corner of our family. "Your sister needs this," she'd say when Amelia took my things. "She's older, she's special." One Christmas, when Amelia found a brand new journal under the tree, I unwrapped socks. I remember sitting with an adult's resolve in a child's body, nodding, smiling to prove I wasn't selfish. I told myself I didn't deserve more. That pattern stretched into adulthood like a shadow that never left. When Amelia announced her engagement to Eric, my mother's tears of joy soaked her blouse. "She always deserved a man like him," she sighed. I watched my sister bask in it, my own glass of champagne untouched. I had been seeing someone at the time too, but I knew better than to speak of it. And now, here was this photograph burning in my hand, evidence of Eric's betrayal, hand-delivered by Amelia herself. What struck me wasn't just the cheating. It was the note scrawled across the back. Don't let them tell you I didn't know. At first it puzzled me. Did she want revenge on him? Pity from us? Or was this about something larger, something older? Something with strands that stretched back to the pattern that defined our lives. Her golden pedestal and my silent scorn. Because here was the truth I had carried quietly. Beneath Amelia's shine, there was always a rawness. Her need for recognition never stopped, as though the golden light cast on her had become a drug she couldn't live without. And if Eric's betrayal chipped away at it, if the illusion of her perfect life began to crack, it would be me standing closest, the shadow that had always been there. And that thought terrified me. Because if history repeated itself, I wouldn't be shielded from her collapse. I would be used by it, swallowed back into the role of scapegoat who absorbs silence, whispers, and blame. The envelope was more than proof of infidelity. It was an invocation. Her way of saying, remember your place. Remember the script. That night, when I lay awake replaying her look, the note, the photo, I wondered if Amelia had ever seen me as more than a prop. If she even realized that her miracle glow drained light from everyone else, that someone had to play the sacrifice for it to thrive. In a family like ours, wounds don't show as scars. They live in what is withheld, love handed out in crumbs, worth always weighed against someone else's shine. And in that moment, I realized this baby shower was not the beginning of Amelia's unraveling. It was only the stage she had chosen for me to take my old role again, but I was older now. And the question burned inside me, would I still play it? The photograph kept haunting me. I tucked it back into the envelope, but it was as if it burned through the thin paper, searing me with its presence. Every time Amelia smiled for another photo, every time Eric politely laughed with friends, I felt like I was living inside a staged play where everyone knew their lines, except me. But then, as the cake was brought out, a clue revealed itself. Amelia's voice cracked as she thanked everyone for coming. Her hand pressed against her belly with exaggerated tenderness, but her gaze darted to me again, as if she were speaking only to me. Her words were syrupy, but the pauses between them carried weight, something unspoken twisting underneath. That's when I realized it. Amelia hadn't wanted me to keep the photo a secret. She had wanted me to notice, to become the witness. But to what exactly? I thought back to the note. Don't let them tell you I didn't know. At first I assumed it was about Eric's affair, but another interpretation struck me. What if the note wasn't about Eric at all? What if it was about the baby? The thought felt obscene even to me. But dread has a way of multiplying in silence. I kept looking at Eric, his stiff smile, how his gaze never lingered long on Amelia. And then at Amelia, whose every movement on that stage of pastel bliss was just a touch overperformed, like an actress afraid the audience might catch on. Later, when the gifts were nearly opened, I noticed something even stranger. One of the gift bags bore Amelia's handwriting, even though the card inside was supposedly from a friend. I flipped it open discreetly and realized the penmanship matched the back of the photograph. Amelia had planted these things like breadcrumbs. That wasn't an accident, and for what purpose? To trap him? To expose him? Or worse, to expose me? The halfway twist struck when Eric approached me during a lull, his drink trembling faintly in his hand. She shouldn't have given you anything, he muttered, his eyes clouded not with guilt, but with something closer to fear. When I asked what he meant, he shook his head sharply. It isn't what you think. The words fell like a stone into my gut. Why would he assume I had already drawn conclusions unless he knew about the photo? Unless Amelia had shown it before or hinted at darker secrets. Was this marriage, this family, just another stage production, one I was unwillingly pulled into? And then another fragment slid into place. I remembered a night 3 years ago when Amelia called me, drunk and incoherent, whispering things about Eric. He knows, she had cried softly. But if it comes out, they'll all hate me more than him. At the time, I thought it was about some petty fight, another melodramatic flare-up in their volatile relationship. But now the meaning shifted, rearranged itself like a puzzle where the picture finally started to emerge. The possibility terrified me. What if Eric wasn't just cheating? What if he wasn't even the father? What if Amelia had always known this? And today, on the day meant to cement her place as the glowing mother-to-be, she deliberately chose to detonate her life, dragging me down with the wreckage. When my sister's hand brushed mine later, as if in silent communion, her eyes locked on mine with something almost triumphant. It wasn't desperation, it was possession. The realization hit me hard. The photo, the letter, Eric's panic, it wasn't about confession or plea. It was about control. Amelia wasn't unraveling. She was orchestrating, and I was her chosen witness, her unwilling accomplice, which meant something worse was coming. Something I hadn't yet seen. The party was nearly over when Amelia finally cornered me. Guests were starting to leave, drifting out the door with leftover slices of cake wrapped in foil, the air thinning of laughter until only the residue of it clung to the room. Eric busied himself in the kitchen, clattering dishes with too much force, as though washing the mugs could scrub away whatever was simmering between us. Amelia slid into the chair across from me, her swollen belly pressing against the table's edge, her smile still painted on as if anyone might walk back in at any second. But her eyes were sharp, wet with adrenaline. "You opened it," she said softly. Not a question. More like a decree. I didn't answer. The envelope burned in my bag like an exposed nerve. "Good," she added. "You needed to." I shifted under her gaze, unsure if the word needed meant the same thing for me as it did for her. "Why give it to me?" I whispered, keeping my voice low so Eric wouldn't hear from the kitchen. "Why not tell him? Or tell literally anyone else?" Her laugh was soft, mocking in its tenderness. Because they'd never believe me. They never have, remember? Mom, Dad, all of them. They believed what they wanted to believe. Her hand tightened over mine, her skin clammy and cold despite the room's warmth. "But you were always watching. You saw what it was like, how they never let me be just human." It was manipulative, and yet part of it lanced the old wound inside me, the years of comparison, my own invisibility. She was tugging at it like she always knew how. "Amelia, is this about the baby?" The question split from me before I could stop it. Her expression flickered. Rage, fear, pride, all tangled in a storm that raged across her face before she masked it again. "You think I'd say something like that out loud? Here?" She gestured vaguely toward the house, toward Eric. He's been walking around with his curated smile and his half-truths. I've carried this weight alone for months. And when I finally decide to tell the truth, you look at me like I'm the villain. "I don't know what you want from me," I admitted. Support? Validation? Or someone else to take the fall when it all comes out? Her nails dug into the back of my hand now, sharp crescents forming in my skin. "Don't twist this. Don't you dare make this about you." She leaned in closer, her voice a hiss. "I told them because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. And if it destroys everything, then maybe everything deserves to be destroyed." "Who is it then?" I asked suddenly. My own voice startled me. If Eric isn't the father, then who? Her face froze, and for a terrifying second, it was like she hadn't expected me to ask directly. Her mouth opened and closed before curving into a chilling smile. "Does it matter? They'll believe what they want to believe. And they'll drag you into it no matter what you do. You think you can sit in the shadows forever, but you can't. You'll end up in the fire with me." Eric's footsteps echoed near the doorway, and she instantly softened her features, releasing my hand, her voice mellow. "Thank you again for coming today," she said sweetly, just loud enough for him to hear, her mask sliding seamlessly into place. I stared at her, heart pounding. This wasn't a confession. It wasn't even remorse. It was a game of control, every move designed to keep me bound to her. And even now she was winning, because part of me couldn't tell if she was lying, or telling the truest truth I had ever heard. The air was brittle after that conversation, as though every balloon and ribbon in the room were just one breath away from snapping. I left Amelia sitting there, her smile sharpened into a mask for Eric, and retreated to the hallway. The photo inside my bag felt heavier than anything I had ever carried, though it was only paper. When the last guest finally left, silence dripped into the house like dark water pooling in corners. Eric stayed in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes that were already clean. Amelia vanished upstairs for a while, and for the first time since the moment she handed me the envelope, I realized I had a choice. I could expose her, or I could walk away. The truth hovered like a blade between us. Suddenly, Amelia reappeared, her eyes red but dry, as if she had forced tears out for rehearsal and already discarded them. She called Eric into the living room before I could decide. "I need to tell you something," she announced, her voice trembling not from fear but from performance. Eric looked at her wearily, his hands still damp from the sink. Amelia, not now. No. She pressed her hand to her belly, the gesture as dramatic as anything she'd ever staged. Tonight. Then, as if she had pulled the pin from a grenade, she repeated it. This baby isn't yours. The words detonated into the silence. Eric staggered slightly, his lips parting, but no sound emerging. My throat went dry. She looked at me as she said it, her eyes burning into mine like she'd brought me here for this moment, as a witness to her fire. The truth, or at least her version of it, was sprawled in the open. Eric finally spoke, his voice breaking. What are you talking about? Amelia tilted her head almost gently, but her tone was cold. You think I didn't see you at the bar? With her? You think I didn't know? Eric's face contorted, shame, confusion, rage. That has nothing to do with... It doesn't mean, Amelia, tell me you're lying. She didn't blink. She just placed both hands over her belly and whispered, This child isn't yours. And then silence. The ceiling fan ticked slowly overhead. A balloon popped in the corner, a sharp crack that made us all flinch. I wanted to intervene. To shout, to demand answers, but I didn't. I stood frozen, my pulse hammering so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. Amelia kept talking, spilling fragments of justification and accusation, her voice rising and falling like a twisted hymn. Eric was shaking now, pacing, gripping his hair, muttering to himself. The house itself seemed to be shrinking around us, tilting under the weight of what had been unleashed. And me, I stood on the edge, balanced between justice and collapse. Should I insist she was lying? Should I hand him the photograph, let him see the note, expose her manipulations? But as I looked at my sister's face, flushed, trembling, glowing not with shame but with something like release, I realized the truth wasn't the point. Her power was in the spectacle, in the ruin she orchestrated. The story itself was her weapon. So I chose silence. I slipped the photograph deeper into my bag, hidden away from both of them. Amelia's voice blurred into background noise, Eric's protests clawing at the air. I walked slowly to the door, my footsteps soft as if I was moving within a dream. She kept talking. I walked into silence. The night air hit my skin like a baptism, cool and merciless. Behind me, the house still pulsed with chaos, but outside, the street was empty, dark, waiting. For the first time, I wasn't just Amelia's shadow. I was gone. I walked for hours that night, the chill of the empty streets pressing against me like a second skin. Each step pulled me farther from the celebration, farther from the wreckage Amelia had set ablaze. Behind me, there would be tears, rage, demands, half-truths stitched into full lies until no one could remember what was real. And maybe that was her intention all along, to blur the truth until it no longer mattered. I thought about the photograph hidden in my bag. Proof, a weapon, or maybe just another one of her props. If I showed it, it would hurt Eric. If I kept it, it would haunt me. Either way, Amelia had ensured I carried some part of her burden. That was her gift, to bind people to her chaos so they could never walk fully free. And yet, as I passed under the skeletal shadows of trees, something loosened inside me. For once, I wasn't scrambling to defend myself or preserve her script. I didn't shield her. I didn't betray her. I simply stepped beyond her reach. It struck me then that silence can be both punishment and salvation. Amelia's greatest fear was to be unseen, unheard, irrelevant. By walking away, I gave her exactly that. Will the truth of her child's paternity surface one day? Perhaps. Will my family ever stop dressing her wounds with ribbons while ignoring the quiet scars she carved into me? Probably not, but I no longer need their acknowledgement, because betrayal isn't always an act of exposure. Sometimes betrayal is leaving the stage before the curtain falls. Was it cowardice or was it freedom? Even now, I still don't know. She smiled at the baby shower, but when she opened her mouth, every secretly wrapped gift, every laugh, every balloon burst into silence. In front of family, she revealed the father wasn't who they thought. One truth, one photo, one sister. The room would never recover,